you know the story of Joseph, right? I mean, he was second in charge over all of Egypt during what was called the famine Stella. And he had this idea before the famine started that it was coming. But there were 7 years of real plenty before the years of famine. So what they did was they stored up the food, and then during the famine, they could basically sell the food to people, and the people could afford to eat. Great system. Love it. The United States has pretty much done the reverse, the opposite. Done it wrong. So right before the Great Depression, the United States actually had a surplus of pork. And we had so many pigs that the pork farmers were actually complaining the price was too low. And so what the government did was they bought up all the excess pigs, and then they killed them and let them rot in a field. And then a few years later, we have the Great Depression, and people are starving, and they can't afford to eat anything. Well, there's no food because the crops failed, right? But if we'd had those pigs, we could have, slaughtered the pigs and fed them to people, but instead we couldn't do that. And government has this real bad habit of destroying assets with intrinsic value, right? So something's valuable, and the government comes in and tears it apart. They'll rip down homes. Chicago is famous for doing this. They didn't have people to buy homes, so because the price was going too low for houses, they said, "Oh, well, let's tear down the houses." Well, that's such a terrible problem. You can afford a house without taking out a 30-year mortgage. That's not a problem. That should be the case. And yet they thought that was so problematic, they had to start tearing down homes and condemning them. I really think that we need to get away from that. We need to go the other direction. We need to allow surpluses. We need to allow more assets to exist than people need. That's really the ideal situation, right? Like, if you can eat pork for cheap, then that's good. If you could eat beef for cheap, then that's good. But instead, the government is destroying things that we need to live and survive. And I'll give you another example. Cash for clunkers. And a lot of people will scratch their heads at that one. What they did was they said that these very brand new cars that were better in many cases because they were newer than a lot of old junkers that people had and they were driving around had to be destroyed. So they actually, instead of saying, "Oh, well, we'll pay you to get into a better vehicle, and then we'll let somebody else who has an even worse vehicle than that buy yours off the used car market," they said, "No, it has to go to a junkyard." And they literally destroyed these vehicles, and so nobody could use them. And for a while, the used car market actually dried up. I know this because while that happened, I was looking to buy a used car. I'm a little tired of government screwing us like this. I mean, they're taking our money and using it to destroy the things we need. That doesn't make any sense at all. We need to have government. If they're going to do anything at all, they need to help us. They need to work towards surpluses so that everyone can have a new car. Everyone can have a pork for dinner. Everyone can have a home that's affordable. I don't know. I think that's a great idea.